Hello and welcome to ManyBeal. This is a little another deconstruction or commenting on a video containing Bernardo Kastrup, and we're dealing with his metaphysics once again, and this time on a channel called Alex O'Connor and a series of podcasts. I think he calls it Within Reason. So he appeals to logic and reason and so on, apparently, right? Okay. I remember this guy, Alex O'Connor, from a few years back, actually 7 or 8 years or 9 years even back, when he started out talking a lot about atheism and so on, right? And so be it. I don't care too much about that, to be honest. But he's also very sort of has his foot into philosophy and these kinds of topics. And that's the reason why he is taking Bernardo Kastrup on for size here, right? So I'd like just to comment on his video here, and maybe I should start out by mentioning that the thumbnail of the video says materialism is false, while the title of the video itself is, as you can see down here, why materialism is complete nonsense. Well, I know that you can phrase things differently, but something being false is not the same as it being nonsense. So if it's complete nonsense, how can it be false? It's just already at the outset of this, the red flags up that this guy, Alex O'Connor, he's not really on top of the philosophical discourse here. And you might add that since Bernardo Kastrup apparently doesn't care about how his opposition metaphysics is framed, why materialism is complete nonsense or why it's false. It must be two different things. Why are they the same? I mean, if it's not, it might be clarified maybe during the video, but why have two different terms for, why call it both nonsense and false, right? It begs it begs an explanation of either of the terms. So it's just, you have to refer, in my opinion, just to cut it short here, right? In my opinion, when you're using the term false, you have to refer to something that can be the case, but it isn't. And that's why it's false, right? False, in my opinion, is a conclusion of a proposition. And a proposition is a kind of communication, you could say, right? If I say that's an elephant, and you say it's true or you say it's false, you are comparing your experience with whatever it is I am referring to. And the conceptual part of what I'm referring to is what we are considering, or I'm considering a response on, core my proposition. And your response is something like true or false, right? Either you experience that elephant or you don't experience that elephant. But that doesn't mean necessarily that it's nonsense just because you don't experience an elephant, right? You would have to understand what an elephant is and maybe have a prior experience of some kind and some kind of cognition of it in order to say that's not an elephant, or I can't experience elephant over there, as you say. So it can't be nonsense. So in my opinion, nonsense and false are just like comparing apples with, storytelling, right? It's like it's two different kinds of categories that are incompatible, right? Okay, let's set in.
This microphone in front of me is made out of?
I think it's made out of mental states, mind states. And the matter that we attribute to it is an extrinsic appearance and an image of mental states.
Okay, so we all know, or those of you who have followed Bernardo Kastrup and maybe Mike deconstructions of his so-called philosophy, that what is he referring to? I mean, is he talking about the thing itself? To use Immanuel Kant's terms, right? Or the phenomena? He's referring to his yeah. If Bernardo Kastrup says everything is mind, then everything is, he calls it mental states, right? So then everything must be some kind of mental state. Okay, but that doesn't help me very much, right? But there's also this inside outside thing. If he's talking about his experience on his dashboard, then he says his dashboard is made of mental state, because that's what that's what he must be referring to. Or is he taking a guess about what that outside world is made of? Well, he can say everything. He could talk about everything basically, because he claims that everything is mind, and therefore he can somehow put terms to everything, because he has this term mind that he can use everywhere. So this is also one of the problems of his philosophy, is you're not really sure what the hell he's talking about. Because everything is X, or whatever you want to call it, then you can say every time somebody says, what is this made of? Well, it's made of X. It's just, how should I put it? It's hard to, it's sort of hard to wrap some good terms around it, I think, or put some good terms to it. It's sort of it's so generalized. It's like, if you can reduce too much, I think, right? If you, and it's not really a reduction what Bernardo Kastrup is doing, but it's like it's he comes up with a term basically, right? And says everything is mind. And because he says everything is mind, he cannot drag in any prior understanding what mind is, because he's using mind to describe all of these things that are used in order to come up with the term mind. So it's also a bit of a cheat to use the term mind. Why don't he make up a completely different new term that doesn't come with any baggage, right? And it's this sophistry of using terms that are already embedded with some kind of understanding, and that understanding demands some kind of ontology. But then it's a circular argument then, right? You can use the term mind and refer to any understanding of mind without clarifying where that understanding came from. Then you possibly need to do some kind of ontology in order to settle what you mean by mind. That's why his complete philosophy is fucked up, right? Because what it ends up being is that he can always say, whenever anybody says something, it's made of mind, because I decided it is, right? So it doesn't matter if it's phenomena or noumena or whatever. It's, at the end of the day, you can always say the magical, answer, it's made of mind or mental states or whatever his favorite choice of term is at the moment, right? So,
okay, quite a concise answer to what can be in this context quite a complicated question, and perhaps one that's already raised.
Is it a concise? Is it concise? You could say in the sense of he didn't use too many terms or too many words. Maybe if that's what you mean by concise, okay, but who cares? I care about it's being correct or good philosophy, right? So as I've said in earlier deconstructions of Bernardo Kastrup, and that is that if you say everything is X, whatever that term X might be, you have basically ended all further philosophy there. Or you should do. Otherwise, you're cheating, in my opinion. Because if you start to say, well, yeah, then there's this kind of mind, and then there's sort of that kind of mind, and this kind of mind doesn't mix with that kind of mind, and so on, right? Then you're cheating, because then you're shrouding some kind of dualism or pluralism within a magical term called mind. So he's basically linguistically and sophistically, is that a term? Sophistically? Okay, you know what I mean. He's, by using the terms, he's trying to avoid a problem that he probably cannot deal with, which is some kind of dualism or pluralism, right? But let's just call it dualism for simplicity's sake. It is cheating to just say everything is X and then proceed to further clarify. Because if you have said everything is X, then there's no particularity to anything. Because why would that X be more interesting than that X? If it's all X, it's just the same. There's no need for further clarification. And if he does any further clarification, he's cheating. He is manipulating you into accepting an abstraction of everything being one kind, while he's still doing some kind of dualism or pluralism in order to explain shit. I'm not biting on that trick, right?
A few eyebrows. I think that if you ask the average person on the street, what is a microphone made out of? They might tell you it's made out of, metal. You ask them what metal's made out of, and you sort of keep going down until you get to it's made out of atoms. And you ask, what's an atom made out of? Well, it's made out of, electrons. And what's an electron made out of? And they kind of begin to struggle a little bit. And this is an idea that I've been interested in recently, and there's this growing popularity in.
Yeah, but it's the old inside-outside dichotomy problem, right? That when you talk about X, or maybe not X is the best, when you're talking about some kind of experience, an object, let's say like a microphone he mentions, when you talk about it, what are you talking about? Are you talking about my experience of it, or a potential, for some reason, established external world where that supposed object is, that is represented as a microphone to me? So it's important that you first of all clarify with the people you talk to if they understand this potential pitfall, also known as naive realism, right? As far as I'm concerned. So it's like, are you talking about your experience, or are you talking about an object outside your experiences? Well, if it's my experiences, I'm describing some colors and sounds and tastes and touch and smells, right? I'm probably not going to smell or taste the microphone in that, but there might be other objects where it's necessary or feasible. But metal is not an experience. It's not even a cognition. The cognition was microphone, right? So metal is an abstraction of some kind. It's a particular set of, you could maybe say it's a kind of cognition, but I don't think it would be, because you can have metal in a car, you can have metal in a computer, you can have metal in whatever, right? It's more like a particular, it's a description of a particular qualia, the way it feels and the way it looks and the way, it shines in light and whatever, right? So it's more like a description of qualia, I would say. So it can't be made of an abstraction, can it? Because the abstraction was there because of the cognition that was initiated because of those qualia. So it can't be made of that thing that you abstracted, because that abstraction, I mean, even if you're talking about your dashboard, then your dashboard, then the abstraction you get from the experience on the dashboard is not a part of the dashboard, though they are part of you, right? No, but it's this, and this particular subject of understanding what we're actually talking about when we're dealing with this level, it is usually where everything goes astray, or what's it called, right? It goes haywire, because people talk past each other. They think they understand what the other one says, and then they have to explain, and then they misunderstand. Do I understand you correctly? What? And if the one person is a naive realist and the other one is a what is it he called, objective idealist or whatever, Bernardo Kastrup, then they are very likely going to talk past each other if they don't have settled this question beforehand. What are we actually talking about, right? Do we have a similar, or at least a settled understanding of each of our ontology and metaphysics, in order to not confuse each other and the listeners on what we're talking about, right?
In the suggestion that once we get down to the foundation of reality, we're talking about something like consciousness.
Okay, so when we get down to the foundations of reality, okay, so there's already a lot of extreme dogmas here that is presented as if it's sort of given to him somehow, right? But what he talks about, these are all abstractions. These are all abstractions, the atoms and so on. They're all abstractions, and you can make up new, smaller abstractions as much as you want. You're not going to get to any foundation of anything that is external to your experience, just digging further down into your abstractions. And if you want to dig further into the particular terms I use here and my philosophy, there's a whole series I just prepared in 7 parts, I think, where I present my whole philosophy. And it should be quite clear what I mean when I say this, right?
Or mind. I've been talking about that in the context of panpsychism. You have a few choice words for panpsychism, which hopefully we can get into and we can critique it. But I think they kind of come from the same kind of starting point, which is that this assumption of material.
I think my personal thinking concerning the idea of atoms and the undivisible and smallest constituent of some objects, right? It comes from the idea that when I let go of, if I grab a rock and raise it up and let it go, it will move to hit the ground, so to say, right? And then when I take a bicycle and do the same, it moves in the same way, though it's a different object. It's a different cognition. If I take a cow, or I take, a dog, or be nice to your dog, right? Or a soft ice, or a pizza, or a tomato, or an elephant, it seems to do the same shit, right? It behaves the same way, but they're different cognitions. So how do you sort of go about dealing with this? Well, they might ultimately, at a more minute level, actually be made of the same kind of stuff, right? So it's because they are actually made, though they look differently to me and different cognitions, they are maybe just it's a theory, right? Maybe they're just made of the same stuff. I think I'm going to call that matter, right? So it's like when shit behaves, it's because it's made of matter. It's a kind of theory, you could say, right? But it doesn't explain anything. Just because somebody came up with the term matter doesn't explain anything. It's a theory, right? And the theory is based on a recognition of a pattern of behavior. So it's because of the behavior, the need for the idea of matter has arisen. It's not because somebody looked at a leaf out on the pavement and said, look, it's matter. Oh my God, it's matter. Look, you can't do that, right? So it must be an abstraction. Okay, even it's an abstraction, it's not empirical, but the empirical aspect of it was me experiencing a leaf or a bicycle or a pizza or a rock or a dog or whatever it was, right? These were the empirical facts. The idea of matter is a completely different category. It's an abstraction. It's an idea I created, right? In order to deal with certain behaviors of my experience.
Materialism, that everything is kind of made up of stuff, like, inert atoms that bump into each other, is somehow mistaken. Bearing in mind that probably the majority of people who are listening are materialists, I would assume. How do you begin getting into a discussion about what the world is really made of?
Well, just to be clear, I'm not a materialist, but I'm not an idealist either, right? So go listen to my series on my philosophy a few days back, right?
And trying to argue that materialism is false.
Well, we need to get out some of the false implications that people usually derive if I say that the microphone is made of mental state. I'm not denying metal. I'm not denying what appears to perception and measurement as matter, as atoms. These things are empirically verified. We can measure this stuff. There is something out there that goes by the name of atom. And
yeah, but you can measure all you want. That doesn't create atoms, right? If I have something, a new object I haven't seen before, I can measure how long it is compared to some other shit, right? I can take this stick and say this new object is 4 stick long. Now I prove that it's matter. No, that's not how it works. You're bringing in your dogma and say, because I decided that this object I found must be made of matter, because when I let it go and it falls to the ground, so it must be made of matter, right? No, that's not a proof. That's not a proof. It's not. That's not. That's. What would you even call that? It's sort of a dogma, right? You have decided that it's made of this, and then when you start to measure it, you're not really measuring what it is you think it's made of. That idea that you created, you're not measuring that idea. You're measuring the object, and then say the object is quantified this way, and therefore the matter it's made of is quantified this way. Well, it's sort of the idea of matter just comes along for the ride in sort of it's a kind of free in a free manner, where because you have an object and you say matter, when you're dealing with that object, you're also dealing with matter, but matter only arrived because you decided it should be there.
And metal and aluminium and so forth. None of that is denied. I'm not denying that there is an external world beyond my mind. What
I'm not denying. It's not about denying it. So this is important, right? This is that I've criticized endlessly Bernardo Kastrup for not dealing sufficiently with this question of an external world. He's saying, I'm not denying it, so therefore it must be there. It's sort of implied in what he's saying here. It's completely ridiculous. All right? I go a long way to deal with the question of, quote, an external world in a whole part of my series of my philosophy. So you can go and listen to how I deal with the idea of an external world. Bernardo Kastrup just hand waves and say, well, I'm not denying it. Okay. It's like for me to say that if I've heard somebody say that there is a yellow cow on the far side of the moon, and then I say, well, I'm not denying it, so it must be the case, or what? I mean, this kind of argumentation is so fucking stupid. It's hard for me to believe that he actually is satisfied. He has satisfied himself with this kind of answer.
saying is that this external world beyond my mind, just like my mind, is also made of mental states.
Yeah.
And
this is sort of this quick fix, right? These humongous questions he seems to be answering here, and people apparently don't want to scrutinize too much because he's actually playing into the idea of naive realism here. It is incredible, right? This external world is just there. Well, okay. If you have your experiences, right? Then if you say there's something external to your experiences, they can't be experiences. They can't be a part of those things, those phenomena you call your experiences or phenomena, right? Because they're outside. So whatever it might be that you're claiming when saying outside, it cannot be any one of those that you have, because those would be inside. Otherwise, you would be completely screwing with the idea of an inside-outside dichotomy, right? So if you're saying there is an outside and it's not an experience, then that which is out there cannot be one of your experiences. So if it's not one of your experiences, how did you get to the idea of an external world? At most, it can be something that you imagine. Or you have dogmatized based on some experience you had, somebody told you or whatever, right? Or you have lured yourself into the dogma. But there is, in my opinion, and listen carefully, there is no phenomena of mind that necessitates the conclusion that there must be something external to my experiences. None of my experiences says that. It's all dogmatic, in my opinion, if you do that. There is nothing about my experience that says there must be something outside my experiences, right? What would that be? What color would it be? What sound would it be? What taste would it be? What touch would it be? And what smell would it be? Or would it be your pain in your left toe or your stomach ache, right? Or is it just an imagination, actually, right? Because the experience itself is just the experience. It can't be an outside in itself, because that violates the idea of your inside-outside dichotomy. So if you say there is an external world, you have to argue very clearly about how you get to that, in my opinion. This is not good enough, man. It's below rookie level of philosophy here, right? I won't deny it. He's talking to his own experiences, man, right? And therefore thinking he can come up with some kind of proof of an external world. No, you can't do it that way. But if you want to understand how I do it, I encourage you to go listen to my series on my philosophy. And particularly, I think it's part 2, where I deal with how to deal with the idea of an external world.
just as my mental states appear to you as matter, my brain, the atoms of my body, the very measurable, very physical stuff, so the mental states that constitute the external world appear to me as matter.
So the mental states of the external world, he hasn't clarified why there's an external world or how he got to it. He hasn't clarified why it must be made of that mind or mental state that he's talking about, other than he's just decided so. And then why would it look like that particular experience you have, other than you're just connecting the dots to get what you want, right? You're not explaining anything. Well, it looks like what I am experiencing. Well, okay, dude, right? Sherlock. I mean, it's like it looks because that's what it looks like. But I mean, come on, man, right? But a third thing is, you are not experiencing matter, as I just clarified. That's an abstraction. So this is sort of a guy, Bernardo Kastrup, who is completely enveloped in his own abstractions and ideas, right? And there is no good philosophy that can emanate from this kind of thinking, in my opinion. It's completely fucked up from the beginning.
Part of which is this microphone made of mental states in front of you. So we have to avoid this culture-induced wrong implications and false dichotomy, and start by saying what we are not denying, so people don't run away with an assumption that is false.
Oh my God, we have to make sure the little people out there, they can't understand my big think, right? So we have to make sure that they don't run away with a so it's sort of when people are sort of there's a term for this I heard recently. I forget what it's called. It's when you're basically arguing in a extremely aggressive manner, you could say, and people are sort of thrown back and say, okay, I guess he's right because he's so, in your face kind of thing, right? Sadly, I can't remember the term. It's kind of something like a fallacy, something like that, right? But it's also about a kind of psychology, maybe. But it's like, he's implying that there cannot possibly be anything wrong with this kind of thinking he's presenting here. And he's sort of foregoing that you might, if you don't understand this, it might be because there's something wrong with you, right? Okay. The ego is strong in this one, right?
And then explain what we do mean.
So the real world, so to speak, is out there.
Okay. So he said that the real world. Okay, this is good stuff, right?
Some people think that.
Okay, the real world is out there. Okay, so this guy is possibly a naive realist. He doesn't understand the ramifications of thinking, of dealing, how to deal with an inside-outside dichotomy, as he just appealed to here, right? Mr. Alex O'Connor. As I just tried to clarify, if you think really hard about this, you have to, at some point, get to the realization, in my opinion, that what you actually have is experiences. You have colors, sounds, smells, touches, and taste, right? Touch and taste. And among these qualia, as I call them, with one term, you can cognize various shit, like I'm cognizing my glass of water here, right? Water glass or glass, let's say, right? But it was, I cognized it because there was some, I touched it as I have a cold feeling and a hard feeling, and it's transparent, and it can hold water, and it behaves in a certain way when I touch it, and so on and so on and so on, right? But these are all qualia, and the cognition is what I am dealing with, right? The objectification, you could say, or the cognition is probably the best term to use, of a particular aspect of this screen of qualia. But all of this must be something I have access to, right? I can't say this glass is outside because I'm experiencing it, right? So it must be an inside quote. So what would be an outside? I can't say, well, over there is an outside, but if I don't go close enough, it's not an outside. Well, I could go and touch it, just like I touched this one. So this one, if that's one an inside, that's one over there I can go and touch, must also be an inside. So everything is an inside, no matter how far you think it's away, within that experience, right? So why do you think there is this external world? I'm not saying there isn't. And go and listen to my series on my philosophy, if you please, right? But it's just taking this shit for granted. It just tells me how little these people actually understand of this very, 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 very fundamental aspect of philosophy, right? And getting this right is just, it will screw up the rest of your philosophy if you don't.
If you think that everything's made up of mind, that kind of the microphone is like just an idea in my head, or that I've somehow created it by my imagination, a bit like a dream that I'm having right now. But that's That's not what you're getting at, right?
That's not what I'm saying. What you are describing is either solipsism or a version of subjective idealism, a la Berkeley, who said, to be is to be perceived, so things exist only insofar as they are perceived. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that, yes.
No, but it's like, yeah, you can say that if I'm if I turn my head, was referring to this glass of water, and then if I turn over here, I'm no longer experiencing that glass of water, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I can't say that it doesn't exist, but I can't say that it does exist either. I'll have to say, I don't know. If somebody I made a proposition that says there is a glass of water on this table, I would have to say, I don't know. And then when I turn my head, okay, now I know, right? There it is. But in this case, it's I don't know. It's not, there's no glass. No. I can't say that because I would have to experience it to say there is no glass. But when I do that, there is a glass. It's important you understand these aspects very, very clearly.
Yes, there is a world out there independent of my mind, a world that does what it does and would still do it even if I were not here to perceive it, even if there were nobody here to perceive it. But that world too is just like me, is made of mental states. And when there is a perceiver,
it just provokes me this it's made of mental states. It's a fucking annoying claim, right? It's like I decided it is, and now I'm going to explain everything by this that I just made up. And if he says no, in the past people have used the term mind a lot of times, and I have an idea what is meant by mind, well, then you're bringing in another ontology for that term, that abstraction you're using, because I'm not experiencing any mind. To be completely straight up, none of my philosophy uses the term mind because it's unnecessary. It's a made-up word in order to quantify a particular set of experiences. It's not something that it is. It's an artificial category. Just like saying mammal, that cow is a mammal, or whatever, that beaver is a mammal. But you have made up mammal, right? The beaver is a beaver. And then when you experience beaver, you can say, aha, that is what is categorized as mammal, right? Because of similarities with other cognitions of similar objects, like otter or whatever, right? That is also a mammal. But it's not a mammal in that sense. It's a beaver. The mammal part is something you added to the experience. And what is absolutely infuriating to me is when he starts to say that beaver is made of mammal, right? Because that's what he does when he uses the term mind. He just says, well, I'm used to call all of my phenomena mind, or a catch-all term for these phenomena. So I'm going to say everything is made of that term I just used. It's like saying the Eiffel Tower is made of France. It's fucking stupid, man, right? It's so unbelievably stupid.
Those mental states appear to the perceiver according to the qualities that we describe as physicality, like extension, texture, temperature, weight, and so forth.
So what's wrong with saying that, okay, I agree that there's a world outside of my own mental perceptions, but that world is just a physical world, and all there is physicality, things like mass, charge, extension, texture, those kinds of things.
So these are abstract descriptions of your experiences. They're not out there. I mean, yeah. I mean, in what sense could they be out there? If you have established or have some kind of approach to an external world, why would you say your measurement of some kind is out there? That is ridiculous. It's an abstraction you have in your set of phenomena. If I take this thing and compare it to this thing, I could say this thing over here, iPhone, is about two measures of this thing, but it's me doing the abstract calculation or measurement here, and I'm storing that measurement as a part of my experiences, a part of my abstractions. It would be completely ridiculous to claim just because I make this measurement that there's something out there. How ridiculous, man, right?
If you just add those up together, you get a complete description of everything in the world, with the exception maybe of, conscious states like in human beings. But this microphone is just made out of physical material. What's wrong with that?
Well, it leads to all kinds of insoluble problems. And
okay, so just because it leads to so-called insoluble problems doesn't necessarily mean that it's not correct. I'm not saying it is or isn't, right? It depends on what you actually mean when you say this. And I'm not sure Alex O'Connor, he's completely on top of this, right? And in fact, I'm quite confident that it isn't. But is this, well, we run into problems. Oh my God, so we have to reject it. I mean, yeah, point out what the problem is. If there's a contradiction or there's a paradox somewhere and so on, then you can say, because we run into this sort of paradox, and paradoxes is something that I want to avoid, right? It sort of short circuits. The arguments are short circuiting, and then it can't work, right? You can't get anywhere from that.
And significant implications that we don't need to deal with if this story is not true. Let me give you an example.
A story. Okay, so whenever we deal with the terms exist and know and true, right, and moral for that matter, right, I'm sort of, because these are cornerstone terms, not least in my own philosophy, right? When these terms are just thrown around like as if everybody understands them, and it seems that nobody has any clear definition of anything when it comes to these terms, right? So when he said this story is true, what do you mean a story is true? That cannot be propositional, right? Or is a whole story, is that a proposition? How does that work, right?
If you say that, yes, all this physical stuff that we measure is the fundamental layer of reality, and there is nothing else that it is beyond how it appears to me, basically we are saying then that the phenomena are the phenomena.
But how do you know it's an appearance? Isn't it just you and your dogmas? You're saying it's an appearance because I've always classified my experiences as an appearance of something else. But is that something else? How did you get to it? If you can't clarify how you got to it, I have to classify it as pure dogma. And you're not sufficiently mentally strong to identify that you actually need to argue rigidly for that external world. It's just lazy and ignorant even, right?
Thing in itself is its appearance to observation. If we say that, we are saying that the world is made of non-conscious stuff, fundamentally non-conscious, because consciousness is precisely the idea that...
No, but why? So now he's switching terms now. Instead of mind and mental states, all of a sudden it's consciousness now. It's sort of, where did that come from, right? Why are you switching terms now? So he's talking about mind as something that has particular capabilities, apparently. What are those capabilities if it's also mind or consciousness now, right? So consciousness, is that a particular kind of mind? And if you say it is, then you have created a dualism, right? It's ridiculous, this Gordian knot of abstractions that he has created in order to come up with some kind of explanation of an external world he doesn't have access to, right? A fabulated external world, a dogmatic external world. It's not argued, right?
There is something it is like to be the world beyond my own perception of it. There is another ontological ground beyond how things appear to me. There are there is this thing as what something is in and for itself. If we eliminate that, then we have to reduce consciousness.
No, but how do you know that there's something? Because you said that he said that one of his experiences is another individual, or he didn't use those terms, but it's sort of my framing of it, right? That there's some other individual among others, which is Alex O'Connor, which is a defiant of this system through which they are communicating, right? And that is the extrinsic external experience, or his internal experience of that external expression of his internal experience. Bernardo Kastrup has the inside experience of an outside experience of Alex Connor's inside experience, or outside expression, you could say, of Alex O'Connor's inside experience through this communication system. It could be the same sort of if they sat other, in real life at opposite each other at a table or something, right? So he says, when I have an experience, I have an experience of your experience. It's not your actual experience. It's the extrinsic version, the outside version of your inner experience that I have an inner experience of, right? But then again, it's like, but there's a missing link, right? How does an external experience become an internal experience? It's like if you have an external experience of whatever object is out there, you are taking a lot of shit for granted, that there is an external world that is made of this shit you're talking about, that there are similar external inner experiences as you have them, and there can be an external version of it that somehow can transport itself to your dashboard and become an inner experience in you. There's a whole lot of shit taken for granted here, right? Without any clarification.
Consciousness to fundamentally unconscious stuff, which nobody has managed to do, and I would claim it has been proven to be even an incoherent thing to try. It's wrong in principle. It's like saying, how do you reduce the number 5 to a marital status? Something illogical like this. It leads to also unfortunate psychological implications. The most important of which is that
okay, so you're caring about the little people and their weak psychology. We have to be careful that we don't. Oh my God, no. But it's I don't want to. Let's go further.
Consciousness is just some kind of epiphenomenon. If mentation is an epiphenomenon of fundamentally non-mental stuff that exists.
Yeah, but this is materialists trying to make sense of something that is inherently self-contradictory or paradoxical from the beginning. That you have an actual this experience is the outside world I'm looking at. It can't be, right? It can't be an outside world, this which I'm looking at, because it must be something that is part of me. Or if it isn't, then you have a hard time convincing me of a clear delineation of what you mean by inside and outside, right? So it must be inside, since I experience it. But if a naive realist says this is an outside, and they can look at a brain or whatever and say it must be in there, then they say that the mindness of it must be a particular thing that is sort of emerging out of this brain. But it's based on that faulty metaphysics of just extending your experience to be an actual external world. And I completely agree with Bernardo Kastrup on that problem. And then I believe also that's why we arrive at the hard problem, which is sort of illuminating at here, right? But when you understand it correctly, you can say that you can make the question about the hard problem, but you can't get to the answer because it's beyond your reach, right?
Only so far as the stuff I can measure about it. then we are oddities in the universe. We don't really belong here. We are a peculiar accident that's coming to an end. Our consciousness, if it is an epiphenomenon of particular configuration.
How demeaning. We are an accident. Well, I think you are an accident. Well, I'm no fucking accident, right? Just speak for yourself. You can say I'm an accident, right? I'm a stupid monkey on a rock or something, right? And I'm an accidental monkey, right?
Configurations of matter, when those configurations cease to exist, like when my body decomposes and loses its structural and dynamic integrity, then my consciousness ends, and everything that it is like to be me comes to an end, and therefore I'm already dead.
How do you know that? How did you get to that? Right? Well, all these sort of, it's just throwing these claims out in sort of, this happens and that happens and this going on outside and there's these states and it's like he's not philosophizing actually in my best understanding of the word. He's just throwing shit up that he apparently wants to be the case, and then he sort of leans back and say, well, you can't disprove me or something like that, right? So he can keep his so-called philosophy. There's not much philosophy about this, in my humble opinion.
I just don't know it yet. Everything is ultimately for nothing. All of these implications arise from this seemingly small step of saying, well, if we are all acknowledging that there is an external world, it is not a big deal to say, then it is just what it seems to be. In other words, it's just what I can measure. It's just what I perceive. And there is no inner world to it. There is no inner being to it. It seems like a small step, but it is a gigantic, not only logically and empirically unjustified, but a gigantic step as far as human psychology and culture are concerned. And it's unfortunate.
Can you talk to me about...
Okay, I think we'll stop here, and I'll get back to this. I don't know how many parts this will end up becoming, but let's see how it goes. I might jump a bit because it's almost 2 hours long, right? So there might be some topics here, more what is personhood, that might not necessarily be interesting. So I might jump to the next chamber or something in the coming parts. But so far, so good, right? Okay, please share, like, and subscribe. Let me have your comment. What do you think about this? What do you think about my comments to this video and Bernardo Kastrup and Alex O'Connor? And beyond that, have a nice day. See you in the next one.